So I understand a lot of people are succumbing to readiness fatigue, but you need to listen to what I have to say, because we have now entered incredibly dangerous, uncharted waters. It's happened. What I've been warning about for the last 6 months has finally happened. Peace talks between all global superpowers have completely collapsed, and you're not hearing a thing about it on the news. Have you noticed that the trade war has ramped up and the markets are still rallying for some odd reason? Have you noticed that in the last 48 hours, the State Department has said that they're no longer going to attempt to mediate talks between the Ukrainians and the Russians, which is essentially the United States saying, hey, we're no longer going to negotiate with the Russians, because everybody knows that Ukraine is just a proxy for the US. We've also seen the complete and utter collapse of the Iranian talks with the United States over nuclear power and fissile material that they could potentially use to build a bomb. They've completely collapsed after Pete Hegseth, for some impromptu reason, we are told, decided to basically levy a death threat against the entire country in the nuclear form. Guys, we're in a place where if it wasn't so starkly contrasted by the complete oblivion of the masses, maybe it would be more palatable. But it's just surreal that we are now at a point where that facade of deference between Trump and Vladimir Putin has completely crumbled. They're not even buddies now for public face. Do you realize that? And some statements made by Trump, the Russians found incredibly insulting with respect to Victory Day, that I'm going to talk about in just a moment. It's not really stolen valor, but it's very, very close, okay? And we're going to see things escalate in an exponential way, I would say, from this point forward, because the United States is continuing to arm Ukraine covertly via this mineral deal, which is really just a cover for Lend-Lease, which is going to permit the Ukrainians to borrow weapons from the United States, and I think a lot of it's going to go undeclared. I think the fog of war is about to descend in Ukraine. You see, throughout the last 3 years, while the West was declaring what they were providing Ukraine, that was when they were still on talking terms. Because think about it. If you're in a war, why would you ever tell the other side what you're sending your allies? There's no need to tell, the world what NATO is sending to Ukraine. They didn't have to do that. They did that to signal to Russia which rung of the escalatory ladder they were on. They're going to stop doing that now, okay? And the reason why I was hopeful up until, I wasn't, because I knew that this was all just bullshit, but the reason why most people were hopeful is they thought, okay, Trump, Witkoff, they're going to attempt, they're well-meaning, they're going to attempt to try to broker a deal. That has collapsed. There's nothing left after that. Okay, understand that. There's nothing left. So long as there was the prospect of some guy coming along and maybe engaging in some sort of consultation with the Russians to air their grievances and possibly work something out, we were in a place where, okay, things were bad, but there was potential off-ramp. I don't think there's any off-ramps at this point. Now, understand that at the time of making this video, the Kerch Bridge is under massive bombardment by Ukrainian drones. We don't know if there's been any actual successful hits, but we do know traffic has been stopped, and this, of course, is one of the biggest pieces of infrastructure in Russia, and of course has been one of the focal points, one of the landmarks of this conflict, and has been one of the primary targets of Ukraine. The biggest ever drone attack just happened today, a day after the United States brokered the phony baloney deal with the Ukrainians. The day after Mike Waltz, the fall guy, was given his walking papers so they can at least make it look like, hey, we're doing something. And, of course, the day after that peace talks were suspended, okay? And the only way that Ukraine can do that is with NATO guidance systems, with NATO ISR. So do you see where we're at right now? The fog of war is about to descend on the war in Ukraine and Russia, and the Cold War is about to ramp up in unimaginable ways. Essentially, new weapons deliveries to Ukraine. Okay, you have Lindsey Graham talking about bone-crushing sanctions on Russia. They're about to unroll secondary sanctions on Russia. I mean, secondary, is that really even the right word to use at this point in time? You have senators saying that we're willing to turn Putin and his country into fish food, and these were not denounced by Donald Trump or anybody else. And you'll notice that Donald Trump's not denouncing a lot of this incredibly hawkish language, and you think he would, right? In fact, Donald Trump himself is chiming in, insisting that if Putin doesn't make a deal, he's going to arm Ukraine to the teeth. And nobody is talking about this. Isn't that scary? It should be, but we're going to have to wait for an acute crisis situation before eyeballs get on the issue and everybody panic buys into the grocery stores and the whatever's left on the shelves at Walmart. NATO has announced extensive new military exercises, rehearsing an offensive strike on Kaliningrad, the exclave of Russia that is integral to their strategic preparedness. If they're going to engage in a nuclear war with Europe, that's where they're going to launch from. So if NATO is attempting to encircle that and training, rehearsing to take it over, then that could be what causes Russia to push the button. Zelensky is also touting new ballistic missile developments. Now, they've been touting this for a long time. They've been claiming that they have ballistic missiles that they've been building. Of course, they couldn't build this stuff definitely not without the financial support, but I'm guessing that there is going to be NATO implements contained within as well. And that's another sign. If Zelensky is going to start launching ballistic missiles at Russia, and you have F-16s in there operating, of course, there's another $310 million package of F-16 related equipment being sent to Ukraine as we speak. We don't know how many F-16s are there. We don't know if they're capable of carrying nuclear weapons, and neither do the Russians. The Russians must surmise that these are NATO pilots in F-16s and assume that they could be getting set up for a massive decapitation strike. Remember that Russia is surrounded by F-35s that have the potential to carry nuclear weapons along their entire border, from Finland to the Baltics, to Poland, to Ukraine, to Romania, and the Black Sea, and Turkey, of course, who masquerades as being diplomatic towards Russia, but we all know, Turkey will go with whoever is the highest bidder. They have a very low price. And so if Zelensky is saying we now have operational ballistic missiles, the Russians have to assume that any ballistic missile being launched in their direction is nuclear. Do you understand that? And if we're not talking, and if Trump is trolling the Russians in his posts and his rebranding of, is it Veterans Day? I can't remember what it's called in the United States, but the rebranding of it as Victory Day, as if to deride and mock the Russian Victory Day and claim that the United States were the ones who sacrificed the most in World War II, which is absurd. Even if you despise the Russians, you can't say that, okay? Because everybody knows that the Russians gave 40, 50 times the amount of lives to that conflict. And what's very critical here is that the Russian media is taking issue with that. And if the Russian media, for the first time ever, is pitting Trump up against Putin, that is new. Because that means that veneer of civility between the two is completely crumbling now. $1 trillion for defense. I have a joke that says they dodged a bullet there, didn't they? $1 trillion for defense. So a lot of defense funding, and I don't even think that includes the $150 billion for the Golden Dome and all this other nuclear war preparation stuff that they're doing in the shadows. As I indicated, Trump had threatened Vladimir Putin. He says if Putin doesn't make a deal, we're going to give Ukraine a lot. We're going to give them a lot more than they ever got. The only next step really is longer range missiles and maybe some more advanced stealth planes, and maybe green lighting them to target deeper into Russia. Europe has confiscated $3.5 billion in Russian assets in a tit-for-tat exchange because Russia allegedly confiscated some assets of European countries. Okay? So the United States is no longer apparently hamstringing the Ukrainians along. They're openly giving them what they want. And you really have to ask yourself why that is happening. Okay? You have a U.S. defense package to the tune of $310 million that's been greenlit for F-16 training, upgrades, and spare parts, as well as related equipment can be obtained by the Ukrainian military. That's just the beginning. This is one day after the deal. Remember, here is what Russia had to say with respect to Trump's statements on World War II. And I should remind you that Trump is not going to force Zelensky to hold elections that could force him out of office as the price of peace. Okay? Here's what the Russian Foreign Ministry had to say to Trump's World War II troll, where Trump basically said that they were the ones that sacrificed the most in World War II. She quoted U.S. President Franklin Roosevelt. On the European front, the most important event of the year was undoubtedly the crushing counteroffensive of the great Russian army against the mighty German forces. The Russian troops, and you notice how they say mighty German, like back then, they were truthful. It's not that they liked the German forces. Okay, sure, there was a lot of mutual corporate interests there at work between the United States and Russia, but they told the truth back then. They acknowledged the power of the German military at the time. They told the truth. Now, they also told the truth with respect to Russia's contribution. The Russian troops have been destroyed and continue to destroy more manpower, aircraft, tanks, and guns of our common enemy than all other United Nations combined. Fireside Conversations, April 28, 1942, Franklin Roosevelt. Now, Witkoff has retweeted Whiskety Wabbits. Witkoff has retweeted Hegseth's Iranian death threat, which is essentially what that was. If you don't know what I'm talking about, watch yesterday's video. Hegseth effectively stated that the United States is going to be responding to something that the Iranians did at the time and place of their choosing. It was a very sternly worded message, and it indicates that effectively talks have failed. I mean, talks have been delayed. At first, when I heard about that, I said, okay, maybe it was just a delay. Maybe their schedules didn't line up. But the more you look at the sequence of events, the fact that F-18 incident, doing evasive maneuvers, the fires, the cyber attacks, the explosion at the port in Iran, things are escalating. Okay, just step back, take all those things, put them next to each other, and think about what's happening. And now there's no more talks. Okay, so Iranian sanctions are having a toll on their population. According to Iranian media, the prices of butter and milk have increased in the past week, as has sugar and oil become scarce in the market. So Iran is also going to continuously get desperate. They've been incurring massive inflation over the past year, and now they may well see scarcity of the bare necessities. That's the stuff that revolutions are made of. If you have active sleeper cells within Iran, they could potentially be activated. Iran will be left with no choice but to retaliate asymmetrically in some way. Now, just today, as we talk, things are intensifying in Israel as well, seemingly between Israel and the Turks, but it's hard to say where sleeping dogs lie with respect to that. Israel has decided to intensify their military campaign in Gaza. Tens of thousands of reservists will be called up. One of the biggest bombardments by Israel into Syria has happened just in the last few hours, claiming that they're trying to protect the Druze, who are I think they're like pro-Israeli Syrians, but I don't know the extent of that situation. Anyways, the Israelis are claiming that you're treating them poorly, and so they're playing the humanitarian card, which is really laughable, seeing as they committed one of the most unconscionable acts in the last 24 hours in that they attacked a Freedom flotilla that was carrying 30 people in international waters near Malta, okay, with aid for the Gaza Strip. They basically bombed the ship, which is crazy to think about. I mean, had you told me that that was a thing years ago, I would have been like, wow, that must have drawn international condemnation. Nowadays, it's just one piece of static in the thick of white noise. Elements of the Department of Defense are rejecting the explanation that a hard turn by an aircraft carrier was enough to cause a $67 million F-18 fighter jet to slip off the ship. I think I said something about that in my video yesterday. I mean, it just wouldn't make sense that this massive ship that I've never been on a ship that big, but I would presume that the inertia you feel when it turns, even if it does a hard turn, you're probably not going to feel it. Certainly not enough to send things flying off of it. I just don't think it has the centrifugal force to do that sort of thing. So they're claiming now that that doesn't really make a lot of sense. So perhaps something else happened. We're now going to see the extended deployment of the Harry S. Truman USS aircraft carrier deployed in the Red Sea, now been extended by Pete Hegseth. The military buildup in the Middle East continues. We have more air defense systems, more naval power, more intelligence capabilities. Of overall troop presence, U.S. troop presence has increased to 50,000. It's focused on cyber warfare and missile defense. And the Iranians are looking at this, and I think the mullahs have always understood the impropriety of the West when it came to trying to broker and be good faith brokers of peace. But I think now the political class also understands. And so at any time now, like from here on in, things just get really, really bad. Okay, people need to, there's no more, we're going to play pretend and this facade of deference between the global leaders. Maybe something can be worked out with China to a certain extent, but it seems like they're severing that. The Great Wall of China is descending, and here we are with China. So China's Temu has stopped all sales. Now, I've never bought anything off Temu. I look at that website and I'm like, why it looks worse than Alibaba. Do they still call it Alibaba? AliExpress. It looks worse than that. I can't imagine why anybody would ever buy anything off of that. It looks like Walmart squared, okay? But anyways, they're no longer sending shipments. And this comes hours after Trump decided to remove the exemption for purchases under $800 to get around the tariffs, to not pay tariff prices. So this is huge. I mean, think about it. Weeks ago, Trump made an off-the-cuff remark that, oh, maybe someday the tariffs between us and China will be lowered. And the markets rallied. That had to be a record day. You remember that? It was like, what, something stupid like 10%, 12% rally in one day on the basis of that, on the basis of Trump just farting something out there for the world. And has there been any material progress towards that end up until this point? Zero, zilch, nada. In fact, it's went in the complete opposite direction. The trade war is ramped up. The ports are vacant. 35% less traffic at the LA port. You have China selling off U.S. treasuries in April. All of this is happening while the markets are rallying, which is, I don't understand it. I mean, I do understand the human psychology of it all, but I really don't understand. I mean, I do understand. Maybe I just don't want to. I'm holding out hope that maybe there's something else going on that I'm not seeing, but Chinese factories are succumbing to this. apparently they're having their own trouble, but China is prepared to ride this out. They've been preparing for this very thing. I was talking to suppliers of body armor today in Canada, and we were talking about how ill-prepared the government here is. I mean, guys, it's laughable. If you only knew the calls we get from the military and, you know, even just not just the military, but police forces and the government in general, it's scary how unprepared we are. The Chinese have, I mean, they're prepared in every possible way. In every aspect of strategic reserve, they have stockpiles, from gold to grain to oil. They have contingency after contingency, bunker after bunker. They are getting ready, and they, of course, have the machines to turn on to be able to build this stuff in mass. Now, the tariff exemption, why would you do that? I thought you were moving in the other direction. Is that something that you're going to do? Like, you would think that the markets rallying would be the result of some tangible change in policy. There's been no change. There's been zero change. Maybe with, I think he relaxed some sanctions, and I think there was that 90-day pause for semiconductors, but the day after that, he came out and said, well, that's only going to be temporary, right? But the markets just kind of shook that off and kept rallying anyways. I mean, this is very, very strange what's happening right now. And now Trump is saying that there's no inflation and the Fed should lower its rates again. Screaming that out again, tweeting that out, that based on the jobs report and based on the low inflation, well, the Fed needs to stop printing or start printing money, essentially. Now, I'm going to tell you why that he's wrong, because the only reason why inflation is going down, the only reason, and it's not going down, it's just disinflation. It's not deflation, it's disinflation. The price is still going up of stuff, but it's slowed, and that's because of oil prices. That's it. That's the only reason. When oil prices go up, everything goes up, because that basically is the lifeblood of the markets. And so I think the Fed understands this, because as soon as that oil price ticks upwards, inflation is going to start ticking upwards again. And now, because of the lack of supply, that they're saying we have a few weeks of supply remaining on the shelves, because remember, just-in-time delivery, you don't bring stuff over. You don't hold stuff in warehouses. Whatever is in the distribution center warehouses or at the ports, that's what's here possibly forever in terms of Chinese manufactured product, all right? So Trump is saying print more. The Fed is looking at this geopolitical situation, and I think these are the things, you got to give Jerome Powell credit. People say he's anti-Trump. Remember that were it not for Jerome Powell's wild money printing back in 2020, Trump probably wouldn't have had a hope in hell of winning. Even though he lost, he still had a chance, and that was because the markets rallied after March of 2020, solely due to the Fed's incessant money printing, right? And they rocketed that thing up to, heights that I never thought possible. And so I think the Fed is actually factoring in geopolitics. They know war with Iran is coming. They know oil is going over $100 a barrel again. And they also know that this trade war is going to create more demand with less supply. So if they throw more money at that fire, could you imagine people getting cheaper and cheaper loans because they lower interest rates, and taking that money with the loans and going and buying stuff when there's less stuff available? That's going to jack the price of everything, okay? Pakistan is encouraging all citizens residing along the Indian border to stockpile food and water supplies for at least 2 months in preparation for a potential conflict. India Air Force is conducting takeoff and landing drills on highways as part of preparation for possible war. Now, the only reason why you launch from highways and you do those exercises out of fear of a nuclear exchange, out of fear of having your airstrips completely destroyed by nuclear weapons. A lot of people believe that it's just a bunch of bluster on both sides of Pakistan and India, and neither side is going to attack. India, militarily anyways, on paper, is superior to the Pakistanis, but they both have nuclear weapons, which of course nullifies conventional weapons to a certain degree anyways. Pierre Poilievre is taking up the seat of Damien Keurig in Alberta, who gave up their seat so that Pierre could remain. Well, he's going to give up his seat and they're going to run in an election, and Pierre, of course, is going to win. It's Alberta, so he'll be able to remain the leader of the Conservative Party. So that was a cool sacrifice by Damien Keurig, who's going to now be a Canadian rock star for many people. Here is what Sputnik had to say. Sputnik is one of the many mouthpieces of the Kremlin, and they don't write anything that is going to be dissonant with the message of the Kremlin. And so that they're writing this level of derisive material against Trump is incredibly telling. And it's a sign that we've definitely reached a new level of escalation with the Russians on Trump time. Here's what they wrote. Clown world, clown face, icon. Trump's patriotic fantasy. The U.S. is always late and uses nukes against civilians. Actual history, World War II facts. 27 million Soviet deaths, 80% of all Allied casualties. Now, we don't know how much of that was guys being forced to go to the gulags, but let's just assume that maybe half. Either way, they're right in that they sacrificed a lot more than the United States, who I believe lost about 400,000 guys, but that was on multiple fronts. And I don't know if that was that casualties or death. Look, Canada contributed to World War II. We all respect our veterans, especially those guys, right, who fought in that war, which was very justified. But you can't say that we contributed more than the Russians. That's just stupid. That's a form of stolen valor, if you ask me. 75 to 80% of Nazi forces annihilated happened on the Eastern Front. The USSR took Berlin while US bankers profited from both sides. But D-Day, they say, opened June 1944. So the Soviets were already crushing the Germans for 3 years, which is true, faced 1/3 of the Germans' forces versus the USSR's 200 plus divisions. How much is there in a division? Like 20 to 40,000 troops? Millions of troops. In the Pacific Theater, the USSR's August Storm demolished Japanese army in 11 days. The US's contribution, nuking civilians, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. World War I bonus round showed up in 1917. The war started in 1914. Came for war profits and stayed for the victory lap. I'm not saying I agree with all of that statement, but that's where we're at. Okay, so it's over. The honeymoon period between Trump and Putin is over. It's all but collapsed with China and Iran and the United States. They're not talking anymore. So just keep that bug out bag primed and ready. I was going to release an interview with the second part of my interview with Brian Berletic. I'll probably do that in the next few hours. But that's definitely an informative one that you are not going to want to miss. Okay, so I got to go do a lot of work this weekend. Got to get the greenhouse full of edible foods. I would encourage you to get some seeds. We do have some survival seed vault stuff here that we sell at Canadian Preparedness, but that's really just a rainy day thing that you throw in your pantry. That's more for, apocalypse prep. What you want to do right now is, while you're going to get the pick of things, go and buy some fruit and veggie bearing plants. That's the best thing you can do. This is the time to do it. Plant a garden right now, okay? Because just do it. Victory gardens, everybody's got to have a victory garden at this point in time. You don't even need, it's incredible the amount of land the amount of food you can get out of even just a 10 by 10 plot, even just a 100 square foot plot of land, the amount of potatoes, or just the amount of food you can get is really incredible. And if you triple or quadruple that, you could potentially feed your family for a significant period of time on that food if you preserve it well. So, you know, I'm not trying to sell you guys stuff. I know some people think that my whole ethos is I want to get people the gear that they need to get. And so if you want to get gear, support the channel by supporting yourself. That's always been my motto. I see some other people now taking that motto and using it. That's fine. Whatever, man. I have a lot of the rhymes bitten. I suppose it's, what do they say? A nice form of flattery. But I don't care if you buy anything from me, okay? Just get yourself prepared. My mission is to get as many people prepared for what's about to happen as possible, because the readiness fatigue that I'm seeing out there is real, and it's going to be starkly contrasted against the freak out that's about to happen when the next big flashbulb event takes over the headlines. And it always happens. It never fails. I mean, it's just human psychology that people just lull back into a state of complacency, and it seems worse and worse nowadays, because every time we get a shock, like Spain, nationwide power outage, completely unprecedented, at least in that part of the world, okay? People are already used to that. So we reach new heights of normalcy with these increasingly more impactful events. And that's a scary prospect, because that means that eventually you're going to reach that one event in which they're not going to be able to remedy in a reasonable amount of time. And so, but look at what's happening around the world. I mean, World War III is not only here, it's now reached a point in which the last card that they could have played has been played, and it failed. That's the Trump card. The Trump card failed. Trump's job, his deep state job description, basically involves rallying people for World War III, strategic buildup of forces. Pete Hegseth, rally the troops, get some new conscripts, increase recruitment for what's coming. That's what's happening. The leaders aren't talking. I have to beleaguer this point. I should have ended this video 5 minutes ago, but I must beleaguer this point that the trade war is intensifying. It's not coming back. I'm going to make a prediction right now. China and Russia, or China and the United States, are done. They're done. They're done. All trade between China and the United States will eventually cease. The war with Ukraine and Russia is about to get incredibly dangerous. I was going to say something at the beginning of the video, but I didn't, because it might have been too alarmist, but something's going to happen on Victory Day, I believe, May 9th, and I believe that will ironically be possibly the day that in people's memory demarcates the beginning of World War III. All of this stuff, and Trump naming their day as Victory Day, it's something weird is about to happen. And you have all the threats from the Ukrainians that they're going to do something on Victory Day. Strange things are happening. And now it's a big question mark on Iran. They're not talking. And if they're not talking, and Israel has said that, you know, if there's no deal, we're going to attack, and the United States is saying that they're going to attack at the time and place of their choosing, what do they mean by that? Shit's about to pop off, man. Like, this is it. This is it. All right? So, I mean, look, I don't have to make another video. I think I've said my piece, really. All I have to do is just wait until shit goes down now, and people will come crawling back to the channel. I just hope that you know, enough people are preparing for themselves and their communities, or the immediate communities, the ones that they want to assist, because things could get real weird real fast. And the fact is, they might have a plan for themselves. I'm not even so sure, based on the Canadian government's lack of preparedness. I'm not so sure anymore the extent of their continuity of government plans, even for themselves. Definitely in Canada. I mean, the Deepin bunker, maybe, the now decommissioned Deepin bunker. Maybe they got something else that they've dug somewhere. But I wouldn't be surprised if these desultory negotiations are just them flying by the seat of their pants and they have no plan whatsoever for when it all collapses. And so any day now, it's going to happen. And I might not have the internet to brag about it. So, you know, maybe I'll have an AI version of me by that point. Thanks for watching, guys. Take care. Enjoy the weekend.